Today we're going to talk about materialism. Not the materialism of worldly possessions and owning fancy things,
We're living in a material world and I am a material girl or boy.
but the worldview of materialism that says only the physical realm exists. According to the dictionary, materialism is a theory that physical matter is the only or fundamental reality, and that all being and processes and phenomena can be explained as manifestations or results of matter. In other words, all that exists is the material, the natural, or the physical world. There's no metaphysical, spiritual, or supernatural realm beyond us, such as like heaven or hell or any kind of spiritual realm. All of that's unproven superstition. Only things like natural elements, rocks, water, space, matter, energy. Only these kinds of things exist. Maybe there's something beyond these things, but supposedly we have no evidence for any of that. All right, so this worldview became popularized during the 18th and 19th century out of the Enlightenment and became far more predominant as science became secularized with influences like Charles Darwin and Alexander O'Parin, popularizing purely naturalistic explanations for the origin of life and the origin of species. The story goes, the universe came into existence somehow. Everything was energy, atoms or matter banging around, and eventually we got here somehow. And you're now watching me talk about this on YouTube. So while this view is new, coming out of the Enlightenment, which was only a few hundred years ago, I'm going to argue that this worldview of materialism actually is a resurfacing of a much older worldview. It's actually very similar to Hinduism, or the idea that everything came about on its own somehow. So in this video, we're going to look at how materialism is similar to Hinduism. Now, before you get into the comment section, I'm going to say from the outset, I'll admit, materialism is not 100% identical to Hinduism, and that's not what I'm saying. There are plenty of differences. Hinduism is polytheistic, it's spiritual, it's a religion, I understand all that. Nevertheless, both are similar in these ways. They both start with impersonal fundamental realities. Hinduism starts with an impersonal fundamental reality, which is called Brahman. Likewise, materialism asserts an impersonal fundamental reality, which is something like matter, energy, or the quantum realm. And then out of these impersonal fundamental realities manifests or emerges living things. That's where they're similar. In the Vedanta philosophy of Hinduism, it teaches that the self, or Atman, is the life force that animates all living things. Atman animates the physical bodies of all living things, yet is also the same fundamental substance as Brahman, that which it comes from. With both Hinduism and materialism, all living creatures are said to be ontologically or by nature 100% identical to the substance they derived from. Atman is 100% Brahman, just as we are said to be 100% stardust or come from the stars or the natural elements of the universe.
I think we can all agree if your nothing sometimes spontaneously erupts into everything, that's a pretty magical nothing, you guys. And ask the nothing people, what happens when you die? They'll tell you, nothing. You go into nothing. I'm like, you mean you merge back with your creator?
Let's look at materialists themselves asserting these exact ideas. Carl Sagan talked about us being children of the stars when he said, we are their children.
Our ancestors worshipped the sun and they were far from foolish. It makes good sense to revere the sun and the stars.
Because we are their children.
And so with materialism, the stars are our ancestors.
For someone who was never meant for this world, I must confess, I'm suddenly having a hard time leaving it. Of course, they say every atom in our bodies was once part of a star. Maybe I'm not leaving. Maybe I'm going home.
In this view, everything came about on its own. Stardust somehow arranged in such a way to bring about the planets and all the necessary elements at the right time and place in order for the first living cell to arise, and from there, all other life. Carl Sagan also stated, star stuff, the ash of stellar alchemy, had emerged into consciousness.
Curiosity about their environment. They learned to use tools and fire and language. Star stuff. the ash of stellar alchemy had emerged into consciousness.
So now we see the stars becoming aware of themselves, the universe becoming aware of itself as the elements from stars emerge into consciousness. And so with this worldview of materialism and secular humanism, which is now predominant in the sciences and universities, it's ultimately a belief that everything self-emerges, self-created, or came about on its own somehow. In other words, the universe magically exploded on its own, life came from non-life, DNA code came from a non-coder, logic came from non-logic, morality came from non-morality, interdependent systems came from non-interdependent systems, and what I mean by that would be things like human male and female reproductive organs needing to exist at the exact same time and place in order for humans to exist at all. For example, if females emerge somehow, they would just die right away without the males. Or if males emerge somehow, they would also just die right away without the females. Or think about how brains, eyes, ears, light waves, and sound waves all need to exist at the exact same time and place in order for perception to be possible, etc. There's countless interdependent systems we can point to. So again, it's assuming that interdependent systems emerged on their own somehow. As well, it's believed that intelligence came from non-intelligence and consciousness came from non-consciousness. We also see this materialistic self-emerging language in the Humanist Manifestos, which were written up by secular humanists, materialistic atheists, over the last 100 years.
Secular humanism has been around for 90 years. In 1933, the first Secular Humanist Manifesto was published. It identified humanism as a religion with 15 points. It was updated 40 years later in 1973 with a lot more information. And then it was incredibly shortened in 2003.
So I didn't hear an argument against secular humanism. I'm not necessarily on board with everything with the Secular Humanist Manifesto. What specifically about the manifesto that he talked about do you find troubling?
I'm glad you asked. Let's look at the Humanist Manifestos right now and see how it borrows this self-emerging language. Religious humanists regard the universe as self-existing and not created. Humanism believes that man is a part of nature and that he has emerged as a result of a continuous process. Science affirms that the human species is an emergence from natural evolutionary forces. As far as we know, the total personality is a function of the biological organism transacting in a social and cultural context. Humans are an integral part of nature, the result of unguided evolutionary change. Humanists recognize nature as self-existing. All right, so the belief that everything self-exists and emerged on its own is a prevalent secular humanist view. I don't think it's any coincidence then why materialists like Carl Sagan was intrigued with Hinduism and sought to find out if the idea of a rebirthing universe was plausible.
The Hindu religion is the only one of the world's great faiths dedicated to the idea that the cosmos itself undergoes an immense, indeed an infinite, number of deaths and rebirths.
The two worldviews coincide very well with each other. We also see other 19th century Darwinists agreeing that Hinduism and materialism do not necessarily exclude each other, but rather coincide. Indeed, the Hindus were Spinoza's 2,000 years before the birth of Spinoza, Darwinians centuries before the birth of Darwin, and evolutionists centuries before the doctrine of evolution had been accepted by the Huxleys of our time, and before any word like evolution existed in any language in the world. We also see Hindus from the late 1900s, such as Swami Vivekananda, making similar correlations between Hinduism and materialism. Our theory of evolution and of Akasha and Prana is exactly what your modern philosophies have. Your belief in evolution is among our yogis and in the Sankhya philosophy. For instance, Patanjali speaks of one species being changed into another by the infilling of nature. Only he differs from you in the explanation. His explanation of this evolution is spiritual. And here's another quote by Swami. The whole of this universe was present in the cosmic fine universe. This little cell, which became afterwards the man, was simply the involved man and becomes evolved as a man. If this is clear, we have no quarrel with the evolutionists, for we see that if they admit this step, instead of their destroying religion, they will be the greatest supporters of it. And finally, we'll look at a quote by Hindu Viveka Vani, who's interpreting Swami Vivekananda's teachings. Here he's describing the emergence and manifestation of our existence from Brahman as it relates to evolution. And I'll put a link in the description below where you can actually listen to the audio for yourself. It's between the 23 and 27 minute mark. And he says, even the highest product of evolution, and then he lists a bunch of gurus like Gandhi and Confucius, all of this must have been there in potential form in the first protoplasm of life. And even if you go further back into the beginning of the singularity of the universe, from there to the emergence of matter and space and energy and time, to the emergence of stars and planets, to the emergence of life and the evolution of life, all this must have been there at the beginning of the universe also in an unmanifest form. But in what sense? Brahman, which appears as this universe. So the final form of the Vedantic theories is this, about this entire universe. This universe which is appearing goes through a cycle. The appearance or manifestation of Brahman and the transformation of nature. The transformation of nature goes through these two phases of evolution and involution. Nature cycles between manifest and unmanifest. All right, so what are we to make of this apparent correlation between ancient Hindu philosophy and modern materialism? Well, it's very important to understand that the materialism of secular humanism isn't a new worldview. It's a resurfacing of similar ideas that are ancient. It's ultimately the same belief and the same idea that everything comes about on its own somehow. Further, the belief that everything self-emerged and came about on its own somehow literally has zero evidence to support it. It's actually not scientific. And I'd say this is a big reason why materialists today hide behind the label atheist. With the label atheist, you get to appear neutral, indifferent, unbiased, and rational, whereby you pretend to be a skeptic and a pure thinker with a supposed default outlook on the world. However, atheists are really just like kids playing tag who stay on base the entire time so that they never have to be it. That way they can always claim to not have a worldview, therefore never have to support their positive claims about anything. They get to just stay on base and observe everyone else running around with their claims. But here's the thing. The base that they're touching in order to stay safe is materialism. Press a so-called atheist on their beliefs about everything self-emerging somehow, and you'll immediately expose them as materialists, or at least people who heavily lean towards materialism. I've seen it countless times. The worldview of materialism is not a negation of belief, or just saying something like, I don't believe in God. It is in fact a positive belief system that says, I believe everything self-emerged on its own somehow. This is a worldview that blindly asserts that everything from the universe, life, to logic, to morality, to DNA code, interdependent systems, intelligence, and consciousness, etc., magically arrived by itself somehow. This, again, is not scientific. This is not a scientific worldview. It's just a similar belief system like Hinduism. It is simply just a worldview that is asserted. And don't let anyone tell you otherwise. Please let me know in the comments if you're an atheist who is a materialist, or if you might be starting to abandon materialism like prominent atheist Alex O'Connor is.
Or something. And all we do is we just know that, well, when that happens, this experience happens. We know that they correlate. But the question we need to answer is like, why? Why do they come together? And the materialist just sort of doesn't sort of move the dial there at all. Like, does materialism have anything going for it?
I don't think materialism has anything at all going for it. I think it is a artifact of a socio-political dynamics that unfolded a few hundred years ago, 300-400 years ago. It doesn't do anything for us. It has zero explanatory power because all we have as far as pre-theoretical data is concerned are qualitative states. Well, materialism doesn't explain a single qualitative state, so it doesn't explain anything pre-theoretical. It only explains its own assumptions in a circular way.
All right, so thanks for watching Light of the Logos. If you like this video, please give me a like or comment or share or subscribe. And may the light of the Logos, who is the Lord Jesus Christ, shine in the darkness because the darkness cannot overcome it.